Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Dr. Ben Weitz here. Thank you so much for joining me again today. For those of you who enjoy listening to this podcast, please give us a ratings and review on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to see a video version, go to my YouTube page. And if you go to my website, drweitz.com, you can find detailed show notes and a complete transcript. Today, our topic is emotional eating with Melainie Rogers. There are many reasons, I think I butchered that name, but
that's perfect.
there are many reasons why approximately 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. There are genetic factors that make it difficult to get and keep your weight into a healthy range. We may be taking certain medications, such as antidepressants, that tend to make us overeat. There are various hormonal factors, many of which can be treated. Insulin is secreted when we consume foods with a lot of sugar, and a large insulin surge in response to eating a bowl of breakfast cereal or a donut will tend to drop your blood sugar, making you crave more sugar. By the way, I saw an executive from one of the companies that makes cereal on CNBC, and he was bragging about the fact that, isn't it so great that Americans now are eating cereal for dinner as well as breakfast?
No. Wow.
Wow. Anyway, back to sugar and insulin. Over time, we develop insulin resistance, so our pancreas needs to pump out ever greater amounts of insulin, which makes us crave more and more sugar and more carbohydrates, and we end up in this vicious cycle that is hormonally related. In our society, inexpensive, highly processed and addictive junk food is readily available. Such unhealthy food products have been specifically designed to be hyperpalatable and addictive. And there's aggressive marketing to convince us that eating such foods are good for us. And if we eat such high sugar, high fat, high salt foods regularly, we end up being depleted of necessary vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients. And so this may encourage our bodies to eat more to get those nutrients we need. And of course, being cooped up inside due to the COVID-19 crisis, which we're currently undergoing with the stress and worries about getting infected and dying, as well as our loss of income, provide additional reasons for unhealthy eating. Melainie Rogers is here to join us today, and she's a registered dietitian and a certified dietitian and a certified eating disordered registered dietitian. And she's the accredited supervisor in the treatment of eating disorders. She's the founder and director of Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center in New York City. She's the founder and past president of the New York chapter of the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. And she is definitely one of the top experts in binge eating and anorexia, etc. She recently published Redefining Wellness, the Ultimate Diet-Free Guide, which is a free ebook that contains contributions from 150 experts, which can be found on her redefiningwellness.co website. So, Melainie, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, Ben. Thank you for having me.
So before we start the conversation, I'd like to start with a request or comment. I know that looking at some of your work and your blog posts, that you're used to often speaking to a lot of women who tend to be who may be more right brain in their thinking about emotional eating. And I assume that they are probably a big part of your target audience. But I think most of my audience and myself are very left brain, analytical, focused. And, we talk about health and functional medicine. And I think it's important to deal with the emotional stuff. But if there's a way that we can do it so that limited left brain people like me can understand it, that would be helpful.
Sure. Well, I'm trained as a left brain person myself. I'm trained in research.
Okay.
And then so we'll definitely talk about the research and then, of course, behaviors.
Very good. So losing weight is very difficult for most people, which is one of the reasons so many people are overweight. I think the latest statistics show in the United States, something like 70% of the population is overweight. I work with a lot of clients who are trying to lose weight, and many of them have emotional reasons for why they eat. Can you explain some of the emotional reasons people have for overeating or binge eating?
Absolutely. For not most people, but many people, guys and gals. I know you mentioned women earlier, but, for overeating and emotional eating, it's about a 50-50 split between guys and gals.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because we all, male and female, experience emotions. And a driving force behind the key emotion, which is anxiety, is actually, our amygdala. Amygdala is a part of the brain that is responsible for that fight, flight, freeze response. And that's the part of the brain that's responsible for kind of pumping out this feeling of uncertainty and anxiety, generalized anxiety. And what we know from emotional eating, Ben, is that most of our clients or general population, when they're feeling anxious, they seek out carbohydrates usually. They don't usually seek out a chicken breast. The reason for that, right? The reason for that, my clients say to me, my God, I don't know what it is. Why am I, addicted to carbs or sugars? It's not that you're addicted to carbs or sugars. It's that carbohydrates specifically, when you ingest them, increase the amount of serotonin in the brain. Now, many of your viewers may know that serotonin is the chemical that reduces anxiety. So we're talking about a neurobiological process here that we call emotional eating because we think it's all about emotions, but it's actually, a whole chemical response and a domino effect that leads to overeating. And right now with COVID-19, we're seeing so much more of this type of eating.
Right. So when we come in contact with someone who's trying to change their weight and how do you determine what the underlying reasons are? Not everybody's willing or able to actually articulate why they're overeating.
Absolutely. And a big part of that too is that, we're as a society, we're not actually encouraged to check in with our emotions. And certainly there's a gender bias there where guys are definitely, not at all encouraged to connect with their emotions. They're encouraged to be stoic and to, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just get on with it, which that kind of a suppressed emotion just leads to a lot of things going sideways, hence we've got guys and gals, but, more predominantly guys who drink excessively, who, have sex addictions, who gamble excessively. Those are behaviors that are working sideways to manage underlying emotions, which they really have lack of awareness around. So, for us, what we try to do is help our clients understand, or at least start with the behavior, because that's very concrete, and then work backwards to what's the trigger around why you would do that. And often for many people, that's kind of pulling back the layers to figure out what are those underlying feelings, which make people really scared. People get really scared to think about feelings. It's amazing, actually. But yes, that's the process.
So is everybody who's eating for emotional reasons, do they all have an eating disorder?
No, not at all. But they probably have disordered eating. So it's on a spectrum. For many of us, at some time we're all going to eat out of emotion. And a really good acronym that's often used in the substance abuse world that we've adopted in the eating disorder world is HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. The whole quintessential roll into bed or crawl into bed with my pint of ice cream and watch, binge watch TV, Netflix or whatever. So that's emotional eating, right? For comfort, maybe there's been a breakup or your boss yelled at you or COVID-19. So it's on a spectrum, and doing that occasionally just means you're normal, right? But if you're doing that 2 or 3 times a week and feel very out of control and can't stop it, then by default of the frequency and the severity of it, then it may fall into the criteria of what is an eating disorder.
And what's the distinction between emotional eating or overeating and binge eating?
Binge eating is when you eat a larger amount of food than other people would normally have. Let's say you have two entrees for dinner. You eat very quickly and you feel great distress doing it. So it's one thing to sit down and eat a whole pie of pizza pie, and be like, oh gosh, I'm really over full. Wow, I ate all that. But there's not a distress attached to it. That wouldn't be considered a binge. A binge is when people feel out of control and feel great distress by what they're doing.
Okay. So what are some of the best strategies and tips to help patients, clients avoid overeating or binge eating?
Number one thing we find is biological. So my job as a registered dietitian is to separate out biological or physiological binges from emotional binges. And how I would differentiate the two then is that a physiological binge is when our clients get up in the morning, maybe they binged the night before, and they decide, oh, I'm going to skip breakfast this morning, or I'm not hungry for breakfast. They get to lunch and they decide that they're going to have a tomato and a piece of lettuce because they've got to make up for calories that they consumed the night before, right? And you guess it, by the time they get to the end of the day for dinner, they're absolutely ravenous. That's a physiological hunger. And then when they sit down to dinner, they don't just have their steamed chicken breast and little portion of broccoli that they intended to have. They, in fact, go on an outright binge and usually have fried this and fried that and fried this and feel out of control. So that's a physiological binge. And how we try to reduce that is by having people eat consistently throughout the day. So that means you have to have a breakfast, you have to have a lunch, you have to have a snack, you have to have dinner. Go ahead.
Now, yeah, I have to jump in here because this is a constant discussion we have in the functional medicine world.
Yeah.
I've been working with clients with nutrition for over 30 years now. And the big thing we started with was people skip breakfast, they're rushing around, they have, a snack for lunch, and then they overeat for dinner, and that's why they're all overweight. And the mantra was, you have to eat breakfast, you have to eat within so much a period of time of waking up, you have to have small meals throughout the day. And so for years we were preaching, that's the way to be healthy, that's the way to balance your blood sugar. And now the big thing in functional medicine is the way to be healthy is to do intermittent fasting by skipping breakfast.
I know, right? I know, because it's the goal of getting a 12-hour break on your body, right?
Yeah,
so,
or
most
14
people,
hours or 16 hours and compressing your eating window into a narrow range. And so it's kind of funny how it comes full circle. But anyway,
it's so funny how it comes. No, you're absolutely right, because it used to be low fat and then it was no carbs, and now now it's intermittent fasting. Yeah. I don't really advocate any one diet. What I do for my clients is try and figure out what works for them. But we do know conclusively that if you skip breakfast, or let's say you don't do breakfast, okay, I'm cool with that too. I'll work with whatever the client wants to do in the sense of guiding them. But if you're just eating lunch and then you're eating dinner and you're binging, I would suggest that you're just not taking in enough calories for the day, right? And that's a physiological binge. Those intermittent fasters out there, whatever works for you. But if you are binging towards the end of the day, then you may want to have a look at that. And what's interesting about that, Ben, is that it used to be don't eat after 7 p.m. Right. But I think that went out the window because with our current lifestyle, people don't usually get to dinner until 8 or 9. So I think this is the new modification on that, which is just trying to create some kind of gap. But, also it makes me wonder that are people just therefore binge eating or grazing through those 8 8 hours that they can eat. You know, during Ramadan, for example, when the Muslims fast for a month, people gain weight.
Is that right?
Because they starve and then they binge. I'm laughing. I'm sorry. It's not a laughing matter.
No, I know what
But
you
we
mean.
know that
You're
the number,
laughing out of irony, yeah.
yes, out of irony. And I mean, we know from the research that the number one way for people to gain weight is by restricting so excessively that they end up being out of control around food.
Right.
So that's just a physiological
Right. Okay.
fact.
And
Yes.
so that's the physiological, or a part
Yes,
of the
binge.
physiological. And
Yes.
then we have what's the difference between the physiological and the emotional?
So if a client is then eating, consistent food intake throughout the day and meeting their nutritional needs, their fuel needs for the day, and they're still finding that they're getting out of control with eating, and it's not hunger driven. We know it's emotionally driven. So then that becomes the big question of what are those underlying emotions? And for people who are overeating, it can be, the acronym I used earlier. Well, hungry we just eliminated, right? Because we're having consistent eating. But now we've got angry. Now we've got lonely. Now we've got tired. And so it's important for clients to then have a look at, why am I eating right now? I know I'm not hungry. So that brings into play mindfulness, which is just kind of observing your behaviors and not judging, but just being curious, like, why am I doing this? I don't want to eat this. I'm not even tasting it. So helping clients increase that awareness around their behavior.
So what is mindfulness? Everybody throws it around, and when I talk to people, a lot of people are not really sure what it is.
Sure. Mindfulness, from the definition or how we operate with our clients, is really awareness, just being aware that, hey, I'm reaching for the third or fourth or fifth slice of pizza, and I haven't checked in if I'm even hungry because I'm usually disconnected. So, if we think most of us are disconnected like this from what our body is needing from a hunger and fullness perspective, that's our internal regulatory system, leptin, ghrelin, PYY, all of those great feedback hormones are dictating that. And so what we really want to practice or get back into doing is checking in with our body and saying, gosh, I think I'm full. I don't actually need that extra slice.
So what's a practical tip for somebody, who's sitting down and they're eating? Is there a little, tool that they can use to be mindful while they eat?
Absolutely. There's a lot of different ones. Some of them come back to the oldies but the goodies, which is don't eat when you're distracted. And for many of us, it's for dinner anyway, sitting down in front of the TV or the computer and eating, and we look at our plate and my gosh, gee, did I eat all that? I didn't even realize it. Right, the plate's empty. I must have eaten it. That's distracted eating. So first and foremost, try to reduce the distracted eating, which means turn off the TV, shut down the computer, sit there and be thoughtful and notice yourself eating your meal and check in with your body. For some people, it can be helpful if they have a little notepad and just think, oh, how hungry am I? And use a 1 to 5 point scale. How hungry am I when I go in? How full am I at the end of the meal? So that they have a little bit more data collection that can feel more concrete for them around this process, so it doesn't feel all kind of ooh and ethereal and not scientific. So those are just a couple of real simple things. The other thing is when you plate your meal, if you go back for more, check in. Ask yourself, am I still hungry? Yeah, I'm still hungry. Or maybe I've got some mouthfeel going on, so maybe I want some dessert to wrap up or something like that. So it's really checking in with yourself.
Okay. And what are some of the other techniques we can use?
Some other techniques to use would be having a look at checking in, did I eat throughout the day today? And for some people, writing it down can be really helpful as a kind of scientific experiment on themselves.
You mean write down what they're eating?
Yeah, or even if you don't want to write down what you're eating, just write down the time that you ate throughout the day. So for some of us, we're so crazy busy, Ben, that honestly, you can forget to eat. You know, your introduction earlier was about people who are just on the go. and you can really get delayed in eating consistently throughout the day. So if you even just decide that you're going to write down what time of the day you eat throughout the day, it doesn't matter what the food is for now, for this example, and then you can just check, did I eat lunch? Yes, I did. Did I have a snack? Yes, I did. Did I have dinner? And if on one particular day you're overeating at the end of the day, and you go back to your notepad and say, why am I crazy hungry, or why am I wanting to overeat right now? Did I eat today? And you check back and go, oh, I forgot to have lunch. It can happen. It can happen. Or I grabbed a snack for lunch instead of a real meal, and that's why I'm starving right now, you know. So that kind of data collection is important.
Do you like any of the apps for doing that?
Yeah, I do actually. We don't tend to use apps that have calories, because I find that that keeps everything external. So I want clients to get back to their internal regulatory system with those hormones we talked about earlier. So there's a wonderful app we use called Recovery Record, and it's really about logging what time, what you ate, but also hunger and fullness. And then, of course, if we think about, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, it can also tap into if there's any kind of emotional eating going on as well.
What role does negative body image or body dissatisfaction play, and how can this be overcome?
It plays a huge role, because usually what happens is that there is a dissatisfaction with your body and a desire to change it, which usually in our society now, which idolizes the thin ideal, that usually means weight loss, or for a lot of it means beefing up. And so therefore there is usually an attempt to, in the weight loss case, there's an attempt to lose weight and reduce calories. And what we know is that when you reduce calories below a certain amount for an extended period of time, that physiological response we spoke about kicks in, and then people end up overeating, they're fallen off the wagon, they feel despair, they regain the weight plus some. So body image in our current society can be a huge trigger for dieting, weight loss, and weight regain.
So how does somebody get a positive body image?
It doesn't happen overnight, and I would say it's pretty tough to do in the current society where, Ben, we're just bombarded with imagery around, the thin ideal. What we work with our clients on is, okay, let's not go from negative body image and hating your body to I love my body overnight. Like, I think that's almost impossible. What if we just get to body neutrality, which means I just appreciate what my body can do for me. I may not love it. I may still think this about my stomach and my thighs, but I'm not beating myself up all the time. So we work on our clients trying to reduce behaviors that might add to the negative body image, which means, unfollow on Instagram and social media accounts that have you comparing yourself to others. In some cases, we even have our clients tape up their full-length mirrors and just have the mirror above your head, for example, because if you can't view your body without picking it apart, then maybe it's time to just take a short break from doing that, So, and then there's a lot of cognitive challenging of a lot of the thoughts that we all have, some challenging on those thoughts and some reframing of those thoughts to get to at least an appreciation of what your body can do for you.
Can you talk about how, if we eat unhealthy foods, we tend to deplete our bodies of necessary vitamins, minerals, and other needed nutrients, such as, say, protein, that may make us crave more food? In one of your blogs, you wrote that craving sweets could be an indication that we are dehydrated or lacking vitamin C, while a craving for salty foods might mean that we're deficient in sodium or calcium or magnesium or zinc.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we know that, and you alluded to this earlier, that if you're eating a lot of what we call low nutritious food, which still has a role in an overall eating plan, but not if it makes up all of the eating plan, right? So foods that don't have a lot of vitamins and minerals in them can ultimately lead to someone being overfueled calorically, but underfueled nutritionally, which means they're deplete in vitamins and minerals. And then I think that blog really just speaks to cravings and how cravings can direct us. If you listen to your cravings, they can kind of direct you in a way of what you might need a little bit more of.
But, it says on that box of breakfast cereal that it's fortified with vitamins and minerals.
I know, which is why maybe it could be a good dinner choice. Yeah, I know, isn't that crazy? Yeah, but we're finding that that the people who the portion of the population that might be nutritionally depleted, even though we do have a lot of fortification, vitamins don't necessarily, because we're still doing the research on this, right? They don't necessarily check all the boxes just as a sole entity. It's a lot more complicated when vitamin C is detracted from a food source because of all the other elements that play along with the vitamin C versus a synthesized vitamin C, right, supplement, as we well know. Yeah.
Yeah. When vitamin C is found in foods like oranges, there's all sorts of bioflavonoids and other phytonutrients, many of which we've not even figured out what their role is. So I'm a big believer in supplements, but supplements are topping off a natural diet. So you're getting at least a good background of all those phytonutrients that are contained. And just recently, one of the studies on COVID-19, we've seen some positive data on vitamin C, but the bioflavonoids have been shown to be super helpful. And some of the ones particularly that are found in foods that have vitamin C, like hesperidin and rutin. And so I think it's important that you have a phytonutrient-rich, healthy diet with lots of different colors of fruits and vegetables, and then take your vitamin C on top of that. You're going to get a different response than eating Cheerios that are fortified with vitamins.
Exactly. And, it's amazing, Ben, because we're actually designed to seek out variety in food. And this is the very reason for it, because, prior to us, being able to actually identify that there are such things as vitamins and minerals, no one's got a gauge built into their arm that says, you've met your zinc intake and your magnesium intake for the day, etc. Right? So the way that our brains are structured is we seek out variety of food to make sure that we're actually getting in adequate vitamins and minerals throughout the day, which is pretty genius when you think about it. And it can't be replaced by just a simple supplement, as you rightly said.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people now are stressed, so they're eating some of these unhealthy foods because they don't require a lot of preparation. But the reality is we really have more time now because people are at home to fix yourself, a really good, healthy meal with lots of fruits and vegetables, and actually being involved in preparing it and prepping it and cooking it is actually an important part of getting the benefits and enjoyment out of a meal. So I encourage everybody to do that. Now, on the other hand, I also understand that, unfortunately, healthy foods are more expensive. And so you see at these food banks, you don't see a lot of fresh produce being put into those boxes. You see boxes of cereal and packaged foods and things like that. And because those are relatively inexpensive, and ditto for like junk foods, like, our fast food industry, which is probably still doing as much business as they were before because, you can't dine in, but a lot of people do take out anyway, and it's fast and inexpensive.
Right, that's so true. And also there's a shelf life, right, on those items that you mentioned at the food bank. Those things can be put on a shelf or put in a box, easily and stored, whereas fresh fruit and veg don't, and they spoil. So, it's just logistically a lot tougher. And also what we find with food scarcity is that some of the more socioeconomically challenged areas, particularly I can speak for New York City anyway, there's not a lot of grocery stores in certain areas, but there's a hell of a lot of fast food chains in those areas. So it's also access to food. So there's a lot of factors that play into it. And one other thing, Ben, is people are looking for, some people are looking for what's readily available. And this would be a good time to take the time to prepare some of these more nutritious meals and such. But I think, honestly, it also comes down to motivation. And I think so many people are feeling so flat right now with so much uncertainty that it's just kind of stressful. And when stress is high, your motivation tends to go low, which is counterintuitive to what would make you probably feel better. But we know about that, right? Motivation and behavior change is really tough as well.
It's interesting that there seems to be more information than ever on food and healthy eating and nutrition, and yet a lot of people are still confused. Can you comment about that?
Absolutely. I think it's because there's information overwhelm. They're confused because, for example, we used to say that butter was bad and then we went to margarine, and now maybe margarine is bad. So the science keeps changing and therefore consumers can't keep up is one thing. And now with social media, there's such a plethora of information out there, it's hard to even follow. And there's so much contradiction out there as well. And what my pet peeve is all the pseudoscience that is out there on social media. There was one stat I saw recently which suggested that between 8 to 9 out of every 10 comments and information out there on social media around food and wellness is actually bad science or even no science. I'm a registered dietitian. I was medically trained. And so, everything that we do is based upon what is the research. So it's frightening to see a lot of wellness coaches out there who have no training and no understanding of the research, spreading incorrect and inaccurate information. So I feel sorry for the consumer because how can you possibly try to sort through what's rubbish to fact? And then the facts actually do change as more and more research comes in as well. So it's tough. I'm kind of glad that I have the training that I have, but it's still hard to, it's still a lot of information, to filter through.
Yeah, if you're on social media, it seems to me that the biggest trend right now is the carnivore diet, which is meat only. All you eat is meat.
Right. Yeah. So a bit of caveman coming in there, but even cavemen used to run around and get their root vegetables and fruits and berries from the trees and such like that. Yeah, it's just another form of like the Atkins that was around a couple of decades ago, and it's just the same thing.
But even more extreme,
Yes, it is very extreme. Yeah. It's very extreme. And the difficulty with that, and I know there are people who are pro, the difficulty with that, as we've seen with any of these eating plans, is that for a while it works for people until it doesn't, because taste fatigue, physiological needs are not met, etc. And then
starving the microbiome.
Exactly, microbiome, and then people fall off the wagon. And then what's so beautiful and brilliant about these diets is that when the consumer falls off the wagon, they blame themselves. They don't look at the diet and say this diet was setting people up to fail. So hence it just perpetuates itself.
What do you think about high-intensity exercise for emotional eaters? You see people who are obsessed with exercise, especially the gyms are closed, but I'm a gym person and used to seeing certain people at the gym for hours at a time, and that's another form of eating disorders, over exercising. So how should people with who have a tendency towards emotional eating approach exercise? Exercise in moderation is really great for so many reasons. And you as a chiropractor and sports chiropractic person know this. I have a sports nutrition background as well, Ben. So you know that the mental health benefits, the physical health benefits, motility, flexibility, all of these things, we know exercise is really helpful up to a point. But what you're speaking to is a behavior of obsessiveness and going above and beyond what actually technically is healthy. In fact, obsessive exercising is very unhealthy. So what we look at
with what we do is not just people's obsession around food, whether it be undereating or overeating, but that obsessive tendency carries forth in other areas. And one of them, as you said, is over-exercising. Which can be really harmful. So, but what's really interesting about that is that some people overeat or express their emotions through other ways. Over-exercising is a way that people are trying to manage anxiety. It certainly has health benefits, and therefore, unfortunately, it's pretty normalized in our society because it's like, oh, I envy that guy. Look, they're 3 hours at the gym, and it's like, that is so unhealthy. And I wonder about their work ethic, and I also wonder about their relationships, because if you're 3 hours in the gym, you're not going to have some pretty happy people at home. So what we try to do there is we treat the whole person. So it's not just about the food, right? It's about what is your relationship with exercise, and also what's driving that. And often it's a body image underlying piece that's driving that. For the guys, it might be the bulking up, right? Because there's an underlying body image issue, which is an underlying anxiety issue. I mean, I'm simplifying these concepts, but for the point of the illustration, and so we try to get at the underlying reason that one might be over-exercising and try to pull that back. And usually what happens is when you reduce someone who's an over-exerciser, when you reduce their activity, their anxiety goes right through the roof, which is exactly what we want to see, because then we're like, okay, you're self-medicating with exercise, right? So let's get at what's the underlying anxiety about. In the same way that someone might be drinking excessively, you take the alcohol out of the picture and you'll see their anxiety going up. So we need to get at the underlying anxiety.
How about a few tips for those of us who are working with clients with weight problems? How about the client who's not being honest with you? You make recommendations for changing her diet and exercise, and they come back and, 4 weeks later, no change, haven't lost a pound, maybe gained a pound, and they claim that they've eaten nothing all day except a salad and some tuna fish and an apple, and they're doing excessive amounts of exercise, and you just know it's not the case. How do you approach them?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different things there. First and foremost, we know that for a lot of our clients, because of shame, right? Because of shame, and they want to be seen as doing the right thing, and they want to not do the right thing. They want to follow your recommendations, right? They want to please you, Ben, right? They want to please me. They're coming and they're paying us money. And then they find they can't. And then they feel great shame about their behaviors, and they also feel shame about the fact that they can't do what you ask them to do. So they're not always forthcoming with the reality. So we know with our clients that 50% of what they tell us is either true or not true, in the sense of, for our undereaters, they'll report that they're eating a lot more than they are by about 50%. And for our overeaters, they'll underreport how much they're eating by about 50%. So we know that from the get-go that is part of the shame. So our job is not to shame them further, but to kind of figure out how we can set them up to be more successful. So maybe those goals were too ambitious, or maybe actually this is not just occasional overeating, but there's a serious problem going on here that they're not able to rein in on their own, and they actually need more help and more support around that. And maybe they need more therapeutic support to handle the emotional stuff that's causing them to overeat and then lie about it. And then, of course, there's the other piece. Sorry, Ben, the other comment there is, the lessons learned from the greatest loser is that, if people massively restrict and they've lost a lot of weight, even though they still may be in a higher body weight, their metabolic rate shuts down and all sorts of biochemical processes change. And that endures for, up to 6 or 7 years, we've seen from the research thus far. So
what have we seen from The Biggest Loser? Can you go over that?
Yeah, so from The Biggest Loser, where they're able to do research on people who've lost 100 plus pounds, and they're able to follow up with them 6 and 7 years later, all of them regained plus some. And what they actually found is that at the weights they returned to, their metabolic rates never recovered fully to what we would expect a person of their body weight to be. And
wow. And this is almost all of them, you're saying?
Yes. And
Wow.
if you look at The Biggest Loser, which I hate that show, but for research I had to watch it, and I was horrified by the shaming, and it's just disgraceful. But if you remember, those contestants were exercising 6 and 7 hours a day plus. So it wasn't that a lack of exercise was affecting, their metabolic rate, which is a common thought in the sports nutrition world, that's for sure, that exercise will protect your metabolic rate. It's not true. So again, I guess what I want to say for our higher weight clients, it's complicated. And there's so much that we still don't know because of weight bias. Actually, then there hasn't been good research done because assumptions were calories in, calories out. We now know that that's not the case, that it's much more complicated and nuanced and sophisticated than that. And so our higher weight our clients, we don't have good research to be able to advise them accordingly. So compassion is really important, and then making those recommendations more baby steps so that they can feel good and they can feel that they're succeeding,
So, but what could you do? Let's say you're in with a client and, this is somebody who's trying to lose weight, and, they're not being honest about the food they're eating. And how do you coax it out of them? What kind of a, conversation or what can you do? I mean, because so for example, you're sort of recommending that they need like psychological counseling besides the sort of nutrition coaching that somebody like myself can provide. But how do you even bring that up if they're not even admitting?
Yeah, well, if they're not admitting, that means their shame is too great. So, even if you were able to, so here's the thing. Previously, what I guess might have been encouraged is to just say to them blatantly, I don't believe a thing you're telling me and you're lying because the scale tells me the truth. So my question to anyone who would approach them in that manner is, A, will the client come back? B, did you help that client in the future to seek out help? What we find is that when clients drop out of treatment, that it may take them 2 years to come back, if at all. And we know that higher weight clients disproportionately don't seek out help because they're shamed about their body and their weights. So shaming is not a way to go. So we know that our clients are going to underreport how much they're eating because they're ashamed of it. So I'm just going to keep that in my mind, but I'm going to work with what they're willing to talk about. So that might be, I'm not going to comment on how much they had for dinner or not. I'm going to say, okay, well, did we have that breakfast? How did you go with trying to get that breakfast in? Or how did you go with trying to get that lunch in? How we talked about having to make sure we get some protein in there. How did you go with that? And so we talk about those 1 or 2 or even 3 simpler ideas, because the idea is if we can get food in, and by food I mean, you make sure you get your protein there, make sure you get your fat for satiety, make sure you get your carbs in there. I don't want low carbs because you're going to binge on those later. It's a physiological response. If we can work on what we can add in at the times where there are gaps, then that can also help with overeating later on, even if they're not reporting that. I had one client that I worked with, Ben, for 2 years before she admitted that she was binging. I knew she was, but that's part of her process. It's like if someone's drinking alcohol, and they're drinking, but they won't admit to it because that's their process, right? Denial, right? If you think of stages of change, denial, and then there's pre-contemplation and contemplation. So motivational interviewing and thinking of stages of change with behavior can be really helpful as well. And also managing our expectations as the clinicians, right? Because we know that if you just follow what I tell you, you're going to really just see some great results and you're going to be healthier and you're going to recover. And then when they don't do it, it really takes away from our sense of accomplishment. And so we have to check our egos as well and pull back and meet the client where they're at with their process.
How about when you first when they come in for their first consultation and you're somebody like me who just, is super disciplined and, it's like, if this is healthy, then I'm going to do it. Why, I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't do that. But you're meeting a client and you know that they've had problems with weight for a long time. They maybe told you that. And how do you set them up for success? Because I know I've had the occasion more than once, unfortunately, of setting them up on a program and asking them to write everything down, and this is going to be so great, and we're all excited, and that's it. Never saw them again.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Because, you set them up, you're like, we're going to do this, right? Yeah, because it's overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming for them. And I think what's really, really hard is, and I encounter this too, because I'm a registered dietitian. So therefore I know what to eat and what not to eat and all that stuff. I studied it for 7 years and other things. And so we have to be a little bit careful, Ben, because we bring our enthusiasm for what we do, but if our clients were wired in the same way that we're wired, with our interests and our level of passion for this, they wouldn't need our help. Right. So we have to kind of bring it down a notch or two or three. And so I like to share with my clients if they occasionally, whatever, that I love my Doritos and my glass of wine, and like I have to make sure I have, my Kit Kat or my chocolate every day, to normalize it and come down to their level, and to be able to say, gosh, I know this is really hard, and maybe even reflect what other clients struggled with and how they were able to overcome it. Because I think using us as a benchmark, so we're the supposed expert, and we've done, hopefully all this study and clinical practice to get where we are, but we still have to moderate that to help the clients, and maybe their baseline is this, maybe that's as good as it's going to be for them, and they're thrilled with that because it was better than where they were, But I hear you, and I've been in the situation too, beautiful plan, and the client doesn't come back, or they come in and they've done none of it, and that's when you're like, okay, those goals were way too big and overwhelming, right? Let's just start with the basics,
Yeah, good. Okay. So, that was great. Any final thoughts you have for our viewers or listeners?
I hope people have gotten out of this today just that, most people are doing the best that they can, and we can definitely help them, to take that next step and take it in baby steps. And those extreme diets are usually, not exactly what they're cut out to be.
And how can people find out about your programs and getting in touch with you and your clinic? And
absolutely. Check us out on our website, which is balancedwithadtx.com. And also we have a free 20-minute complimentary discovery call, Ben, for any callers who want to call in or sign in via our website. And if you feel as though maybe you're struggling, or someone you love is struggling, and you want to just get a better sense, is this disordered eating? Is this emotional eating? Is this an eating disorder? We can help you sort through that.
And how about practitioners? Is there a way, let's say somebody like myself who's not typically focused on the emotional stuff, is there a way, if I'm working with a client and, I'm working with the dietary stuff, can we interface with you in your office on the emotional part?
Absolutely. I have a team of therapists and I have a team of nutritionists. So we have the medical piece and we have the psychological piece. And our whole philosophy is, gold standard of practice is working collaboratively. So we would love to do that.
So as a practitioner, how would I approach that with sending one of my clients to you, but making sure that, I can continue to work with them on the nutrition part?
Oh, absolutely. That's essential. Is if our clients come in with any kind of team member that they've been working with, our goal is to absolutely insist that they continue to see you because you know them the best. We want to hear from you what you've seen and observed so we can then set up the best care package for them with your collaboration and theirs. And then
so as a practitioner, would I call or
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just give us a call.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Melainie.
Thank you so much, Ben. That's okay. It's all good. Thanks, Ben. What a pleasure.
It was a pleasure for me as well. Thank you.